Welcome, everyone. How many of you are new to, okay, few of you, welcome. We also have people joining us online today, so thank you all for coming today. And we'll be going for about a couple of hours. So we're here to do an energy transfer, which we'll do about halfway through. If any of you have questions online or here in the audience here, just feel free to raise your hand. We'll pass on the mic. We don't need the mic for this room so much, but there are people who are watching live online, so they can hear you and your questions as well. Does anyone have any questions about anything at all before we start? Okay. So we're with the Flower of Life Institute, organization that started here locally, and we have a lot of different initiatives, and this is just one of the things that we do is the events that we do here locally. And of course, after Barb and I, right now, she's going to be doing an aura workshop in a couple of hours as well. So stick around for that if you are interested in that topic. What we're going to do here in this 2-hour segment, though, is we're going to focus on raising your consciousness and vibration and removing some of the density you're carrying in your energy field. And I'll talk a little bit about that for those of you who are new, not to any great extent, because I don't want to repeat a lot of things, and some of you are online as well are already familiar with the process. So what we're going to do is we're going to do that process in a few minutes. Let me tell you a little bit about the organization, our background, and then Barb can share a bit of her story for those of you who have not heard that before. And then we can continue from there. Now, Flower of Life Institute is, we're primarily focused on our local events here and also some international projects as well. Like the events that we do here in this venue are under the Flower of Life umbrella. We also have a kids program, which we call Conscious Youth, and that's every 2 weeks we have an online program. So if you have kids 9 to 18 who are interested in these topics or who may be gifted, they can join that program for free, and we bring in different teachers from all kinds of backgrounds, like Barb teaches aura classes, Michaela teaches channeling, and so on. At the end of June, we have our annual kids camp that's taking place here in Michigan, where we have 3 days, and kids and parents come in from around the country, and we actually have a 3-day intensive where we actually teach them hands-on things like crystals and auras and channeling and animal communication, and it takes place on a farm in the area, and so the kids have a chance to actually practice on live animals and animal communication. And
do you need volunteers?
Yes, we do, actually. Yeah, so if you're interested in... Yeah, okay, yeah. We could definitely use volunteers for the weekend, and that's going to be taking place in Milford, so just check with us at the end of the event today. But that's, and we also have classes on telekinesis and so on. Last year we did that as well, so the kids practice moving objects with their mind or their hands without actually physically touching them, changing the direction of the wind, things like that. So very interesting content for the kids. And then in August we have our annual expo, which is our adult version of the kids program, and that's 3 days, and that's at the Doubletree Hilton in downtown Detroit. Where we rent out 2 floors, and we have a number of different speakers. It's a very high vibrational event, but we do bring in some interesting content like archaeological research that's taking place in the world. But of course, classes and our events that like channeling, for example, energy transfer events, we bring in vibrational healers. So it's, if you want a really significant transformative experience, that's the event you want to come to. You'll learn a lot, but the most common things we hear are that it changes people's lives, and it will do that for you. So that's taking place in August, and of course we need volunteers for that as well, and we are meeting here later this week, or I think Thursday coming up, for anybody who's interested in volunteering at the expo. You can just come back here on that day, and we'll go through the orientation and what you need to do for that. Any questions on any of that? Now, these are just some of the projects we have going on now, part of a very big long-term vision. And we also have a magazine, of course, and all these events are live streamed, and we do put them out on YouTube as well. So many moving parts in the organization. If you have any interest in helping us to facilitate any of that, certainly it helps if you're local, but we do have some roles that can be done remotely. Now, the energy transfer is something that we've been doing here, and it's sort of the foundation of our organization is really the consciousness awakening that's taking place in the world. And this work was really sort of the beginning of what has become a lot of other things. And it's still the foundation of the organization, which is we're a very consciousness-based organization. And what we're going to do here for each of you today is to raise your consciousness and vibration and remove the density. Now, let me explain a little bit of when I use the word density, what I mean. I use the term karmic density, and to some degree it is similar to what you know of as karma in Eastern philosophies, but it's a bit different also. When I use karmic density, what I mean is it could be an energy that you brought into this incarnation. It could come from another incarnation. It could certainly come from earlier in this incarnation. So, for example, if somebody experienced a lot of trauma as a child, that can stay with you as a density in your energy field. And that density, now it doesn't mean that everybody who experienced trauma in their childhood carries it in their energy field. Some of you may be of a very high consciousness and you may not carry that in your energy field. And it's not so much that it's in your energy field, but also you have to be in resonance with it. If you have an experience as a child that was traumatic, but you're no longer in resonance with it, then it has no effect on you. Like many of you, and myself included, for example, my family is very different from me in terms of vibration. That's not a good or a bad or a positive or negative, but we're just very different. And because of that, my reality is quite different from theirs. And I don't resonate with theirs, they don't resonate with mine. It's not that theirs is wrong or mine is right. It's just that we live in entirely different worlds. And in the same way, the density you're carrying in your energy field, you may or may not resonate with it. Some of you, for example, may have some sort of serious illness, let's say cancer as an illness. That does not exist only because it's a physiological thing that exists in your body, but it's also something that you are in resonance with. So quite often what happens when we do these energy transfer events is a lot of people do have dramatic shifts in their health, because when we make such a big change in your energy field, you are now tuning in different information and you're no longer in resonance with the previous version of yourself. So sometimes health issues do resolve quite quickly when we go through this process. But that having been said, my role here in this incarnation and with all of you today is not health. There are certainly a lot of very talented individuals who focus entirely on health, and that's what they're here to do. My role here is to help individuals to elevate their consciousness and to remove the blocks that are standing in the way of them expressing their fullest potential in this incarnation. And the density will prevent you from doing that. And also, more density you have, the more suffering you have in your life. You may, for example, be somebody who has everything in your life. A lot of people have all the money, they have the relationship, yet they're very miserable. That's because even with all the material that they have a lot of density, and that tends to cause suffering. Whereas there are people in the world who have nothing, who live on the streets and live in a state of joy and bliss. And that is because of a higher consciousness and less density. To some degree, we all have some density in order to be able to even exist here in this dimension and experience life here. Some density is necessary, but not a lot is necessary. There are some stories of some spiritual masters in the world who they have so little density that they have to do certain things to anchor themselves here. For example, some eat too much. They eat an insane amount of food because the food creates enough density, enough for them to stay here while still being in this enlightened state. The goal here is to help all of you to move a little farther along on that journey so that you can also exist in a more enlightened state. Now, doesn't mean that in this single instance we're going to remove all of the density and bring you to a fully enlightened state. That may not be a good idea for everyone, because everybody has a different amount of density and everybody's at a different level of consciousness. And if we were to move all of you at the same rate, to the same level, the adjustment to your physical lives and your physical bodies would be too severe. Now, some of you are already at a high level of consciousness, and that's not a big deal. And in some cases, you may enter states of bliss or an elevated state of consciousness during this process. But not all of you will. So repeat the process as often as you can. We do these here monthly, almost monthly. And you can also use the live streams or the YouTube videos from these events. And they're just as effective as being here. And we do post them out on YouTube, and people all over the world use the videos to facilitate this process on their own. And it's just as effective, even though I'm not consciously aware of that process happening at different times of the day. There is a 13th dimensional collective that facilitates this through this physical body for all of those who want to participate. And they're fully aware because they are not limited by space and time as we are in this awareness. And so they know everybody's intention at any given time, and they can facilitate that. So if you find this beneficial, do it as often as you can, and until it's not beneficial for you anymore. And you will, each time you do it, move a little further along that journey. Any questions so far? Anybody? Okay. So I'm going to let Barb tell a little bit about her story, because to a great extent, all of this started, years ago, and it was really meeting her that sort of was a catalyst for us starting a lot of these things, and then since then it's sort of blossomed into lots of different projects that we're doing globally, and it's going to continue into much bigger. But her origin story is kind of interesting, and will sort of set the stage and also give you a bit of a prelude to what she's going to be talking about later in our Aura class.
Well, hi everyone in Facebook land. I'm wearing this outfit to celebrate Peace Fest. Yeah, there's one in Waterford, Michigan, and I just think that I had to go back to my hippie roots. So I just had to say that. But what happened in order for me to get into this situation right here is I had a day where, how it was like synchronicity, I wanted to go to this gas station to get gas. But then I thought, I'm going to vacuum the floor, let's wash some dishes, and let's, fiddle around the house, do a little this, a little that. And all of a sudden this voice says, go to the gas, drop everything, go to this gas station right now. So I said, okay. So I dropped everything and went to the gas station. I found as I pulled in, I saw another car. I had a PT Cruiser back then. But this other one was the same color, but it had a trailer hitch. And this voice said, if you don't talk to the person in that car, you're going to regret it the rest of your life. I said, okay. Now, I'm not the type of person, believe me, I don't go to gas stations and talk to people. I'm there for one purpose, get my gas and get going. But that day I did. And I tapped on their window and I asked them, I said, how do you have a trailer hitch? And they said they drove they had a Camco camper that a motorcycle could pull. And I said, oh, okay, that makes a lot of sense. Well, they also did other things. So they handed me a card on about a foot detox. And I never had one of those things. So I went, eventually I decided to go to that, and we became friends. And they decided to invite me to a raw food potluck. And I goes, ooh, it's not raw meat, is it? No. It's fruit and vegetables and nuts, and they mix them up different ways. I thought, okay, all right, I'll try it. So I went there, and another thing you don't know about me is when I'm in a strange environment, I turn into a turtle. And I'm peeking around and looking at everybody. It's kind of, and everyone was too happy. They were way too happy. And I'm thinking, I don't think that's just the food, So I just looked around at everybody, and I'm tasting it. They explained each food, what they had in it, how they made it, and I'm thinking, oh, that looks good. I'll try that one. No, I'm not trying that one, So I did. I tried it. It was very interesting, very different. So I'm looking around at everybody, and then I saw him. I said, well, what's his name? that I was told, and I said, oh, okay. Well, I got to talk to him. Oh, why do you have to talk to him? Well, I just do. So in the process, and before I left, and this is where I started getting into trouble, trouble, my middle name. Oh. I told him, I says, you have the largest aura I've ever seen. And I equate you with, and I couldn't think of any spiritual master but Gandhi. And I know Gandhi's auras for miles, but his was huge. It was like a whole room. And I said, you've got some kind of gift and you got to utilize that. Well, of course, in his opinion, because, he's yellow, but he's got this blue, part of him, which is very... kind of sure, he'll prove it to me. The ones that's really, you just have to prove things to them. Blue people, I have to tell you, as far as aura colors, blues are my favorite because you have to really work on to prove something to them. They're the original Doubting Thomases, but once they get on board, man, they're 150% the other way. They've got it, and they're really in your corner. So I love all the aura colors, don't mind you, but the blues are the most challenging, and I'm always up for a challenge. So he had me come over to his place, and he was showing me all these gurus, and I was consistent with all the colors. And he said, I had a suspicion that he was showing me the same ones, some of them, over and over. But I was still consistent. Anyway, I proved it to him that I knew what I was talking about. So then we decided to go to the Troy Library and start this whole process. He wanted to see if what he could do would really benefit people. And of course, it did, and we did that for quite a while until they thought we were too weird, and then they threw us out. Then we tried the Rochester Library. Well, that didn't last very long. So then we came here, and they love us. So here we are, and it's been a fun ride. I've met so many people, and I've seen so many people grow from the ability that he has. He just enhances people's. If you have any kind of gift, he's able to work with you and grow the gift. And you've had a lot of people go out in the world because of the ability that he has. So I'm really proud that I'm part of that. And then I feel so good about it. And then because I did the auras. That's what I'm going to be talking about later on. I'll be talking about core colors, and it's my perceptions. Everyone has their own perceptions. If you ever look at any aura books, they all say something different. So everyone has their own opinion, and they're just like anything else. There's no right, there's no wrong. You just take what you can get out of each thing that you see, and choose your own way and path and how you feel about it.
Anybody have any questions for Barb? Okay, so Barb is referring to, we also have a light worker program where we train individuals to develop their spiritual gifts and then put them out into the world so they can live that out in a very substantial way. So we have launched a number of people, and over the months in the future, we will be bringing a lot of them here as they get ready to be in front of audiences, and they've practiced their craft well enough to be able to do that. We also have them present here and at the expo as well. So if you come back in subsequent months, you'll have an opportunity to see some of them as they're just getting out into the world to do something. So as Barb was saying in her story, I did put her to a lot of tests because I come from a very left-brain intellectual background. This wasn't what I've always done. This is only really since I think 2012 or 2011 that I started going in this direction. Prior to that, I was in a very mainstream background. I owned a marketing agency at that time, and all my life, even as a child, I was very entrepreneurial and business-minded. So I was very much involved in the business and financial world. I was a professional trader for a while and used to train and teach people who were traders on a professional level, even some who worked at brokerage houses and things like that. So I come from that kind of a background, not really so much of a spiritual background, although that interest was always there throughout my life. It was always a thread that was there, but I didn't really pay a lot of attention to it. And it was just something that operated there in the background of my life journey. But all throughout my life, a lot of unusual things happened that, of course, my left brain intellectual background I sort of dismissed as being coincidental, and didn't really think much of it until I met Barb and then Michaela and all the other amazing people who are around us these days, which I sort of put all the pieces together, and we started doing this really as an experiment here in Michigan. As Barb said, we've subsequently been kicked out of numerous libraries in the area and ended up here. So we've been doing this for a number of years now, and have had some really remarkable results, and have seen just huge growth in the people who have come to our events, and also those who are in our Lightworker program and so on, and we continue to do it every month. What we're going to do is we're going to, as I said earlier, so this physical body came to realize was prepared for this incarnation to be able to facilitate a connection between the third dimension, so this reality that we're in, and a 13th dimension. And there's a collective of multidimensional beings in the 13th dimension, of many ascended masters and archangels and extraterrestrial consciousnesses and so on, who facilitate this process. My only role in being here is not to actually facilitate the process, but to allow them to do it. And I had an agreement, which I didn't know until some years ago, with them when I came into this life to allow them to utilize this physical body for that purpose. So they've been doing that all throughout my life without my conscious knowledge, which now in hindsight explains all the weird things that occurred when I was younger. And so now I do it with intention, now that I have the awareness of this, and I have, through Michaela, have had a chance to communicate with them as well, and to ask them questions about how this works, why am I here to do this, why do they need me to do it? And one of the things they explained was that there's such a difference between density between the 13th dimension and the third, being that the third is so much more dense, and that they couldn't directly interact with the third dimension without having some sort of an anchor here in the physical, in the third dimension, that could also anchor in the 13th. So my role here is simply to allow this sort of conduit between the 13th and the third dimension so that they can facilitate this process on your behalf, which is why you can go home and watch a YouTube video of one of these events and have the same experience and benefits as if you're here in the audience, because I'm not actually doing it. They're just simply using this physical body as a vessel for what they do. And they are aware of your intentions, regardless of when and where you intend those to occur. So here we'll do it with my intention, and also from what I've heard from people who've attended in person, the experience tends to be a little bit more intense if you are in person versus using YouTube video. I can't speak personally to that, but that is what I've heard from a lot of people. So some of you may experience that. Now, over the years, what I will say is everybody's physical body is different. You're all here at a different level of consciousness, and all of you have different levels of density. And some of you are very sensitive to energy, some of you are not. So everyone's going to have a different experience of this. Some will feel the energy, some may already be feeling the energy, some of you will feel nothing, some of you may enter states of bliss, some of you may have tension at different points of the body, some of you may go home and not be able to be really tired for several days. Over the years, there have been a few people who had so much energy they couldn't sleep for several days. So everybody's physiology is different, and your vibrational body is different. Your reaction to this will be different. But what we can say with consistency is, over the years, as we've done it in our physical audiences and online as well, is that the benefits have been there regardless of your sensory experience. So don't look for the sensory experience so much. it's not really that important. If you have it, that's great. If you don't, that's great. Either way, the benefits are there. And as Barb has observed in her, what she's helped me to do over the years is she is able to see everybody's energy fields before we start, and then she can see how they've changed when we finish. And we've noticed over the years that everybody's energy fields double or triple or more so every time we do this, and the effects are cumulative. So the more often you come, each time your energy field gets larger and larger. And as she describes, those of you who've been coming month after month to these events, your auras are larger than the room as you're entering the room, which is very uncommon for somebody who's coming for the first time. So, the more often you do it, the better it will be for you. Now, one other thing that we're going to do is I'm going to ask you all to send your density to me, which is a little bit counterintuitive for most people who are exposed to spirituality and consciousness, because there is this belief that we need to protect ourselves from other energies and our environment and so on. I don't necessarily agree with that, but that's maybe outside the context of this conversation. But speaking for myself, this is something that I don't concern about and that I don't need to concern about in this life, because my physical structure was prepared to do this in this life. So I can be in any environment, and in fact, all throughout the day, 24 hours a day, people are sending density to me from somewhere in the world. And there's no adverse effect to me, but the benefit to all of you and to them is that they don't have to carry that density forward into their future. Now, sometimes that density may be something you brought into this incarnation, and prior to this time that we're in right now on the planet, it might have taken lifetimes to work through density that you brought through to an incarnation. But now we're having opportunities to accelerate our growth more quickly, and that's why individuals like those of us are here to assist light workers to awaken a little bit more quickly as we head into this very enlightened future that we're heading into in the world. So at a certain point in this process, I will ask you to send your density to me, and I want you to just trust that no harm will come to me in the process. We've been doing this for many years, and if any harm would come, Barb would be able to see it in my energy field. So you can just trust that process and be willing to participate. I will also say that this will cause very big changes in your life. When your outer reality is a projection of your inner vibration, your inner reality. And when we change that inner reality, when we change you on a multidimensional level to such a degree, your external reality has to match it. And currently your external reality is a product of who you were before you entered this space today. And that's going to be different when we finish this process. And as a result, your external reality will start to change to adjust to the new you. Each time you do this, that will happen. That's why Barb was saying a lot of people in our Lightworker program, they grow very quickly, their gifts start to manifest, and they go on a very big, different tangent in their lives. And some of them who are married often get divorced, and those kind of changes can occur because when we make such a big change in your vibration, your life has to match. And quite often, the people in your life no longer match your vibration. And they're not moving with you at the pace that you're moving. And therefore, those things will change. So relationships will change, your life will change, your awareness of how you see your reality will change, your interests will change. You may lose a whole circle of people in your life and attract a whole new one that's at an entirely different consciousness level. So these changes may occur. Now, so for some, it's more subtle than others. Some of you, the density that you're carrying is so substantial that the effect can be very dramatic. We occasionally do get emails from people who their whole life collapses the next day, and we can't really do much about that. But so you're here at your own risk, and if you are not prepared or willing to undergo those kind of changes, then you may want to leave before we begin. But it's always for the better, because we don't do anything here that isn't ultimately for the greater good of your soul and what your soul intended to experience. In fact, it's a density that you're carrying that's preventing you from living to that potential. In the world we live today, as a whole, the consciousness is still very low, but it's rapidly expanding. And the reason, to a great extent, is that there is so much density in this reality. Now, that density, some of it is put there on purpose to keep consciousness low. Some of it comes from food sources like genetically engineered foods or electromagnetic fields or even the 5G cellular system that's being put in place. All of these things do cause our consciousness to be more suppressed. Now, this process will alleviate for much of that and will also reduce the density that's coming from all of those sources as well. And you will find that you have an easier time coping with, if you're very sensitive to electromagnetic fields, for example, being in this world and not having that affect you. Now, for me, those kind of things are not a problem because of the nature of this physical structure. And I've been tested by dowsers and such where if they measure an electromagnetic field or a geopathic stress zone in an area, if I just stand there, it neutralizes that space. So it's not something that I concern about. And to some extent, as you go through this process, your own physical body, because your energy field will expand and your consciousness will grow, will also be more and more resistant to these dense energies like electromagnetic fields. So there are many benefits to this process, and far more than we will have time to get into here. So that's a process we're going to do in a few minutes, and what I'll ask you to do is to send your density to me. And for those of you who are physically in the room, we've occasionally had the question, somebody's concerned, well, what if somebody else is sending their density to me, to you, to Ethan, and it hits me on the way to Ethan? Is that a problem? You don't have to worry about that. Nobody else's density in the room is going to affect any of you. This 13th dimensional collective facilitates this process. They will pull it all from you. All you simply need to do is be willing to participate in this activity. And those of you online, same thing. The process works the same for you remotely as if you're here in person. So they're doing all the work. I'm simply just being here and allowing for that to happen. And even without my conscious awareness, they're doing that throughout the day anyway. Now, so your role is just simply to be here and be willing to participate. Now, if you want to focus on anything in your life that's causing you stress or negative emotions, generally, when you have negative emotions around something, that's a sign that there's density in that particular area of your life. And you can certainly focus on those things and intend to send that density to me. And if you want to, you can visualize that as a dark cloud of energy and just send it to my energy field. As Barb describes it, how she sees it is she can see this dark energy coming from people when we're doing these events, and it disintegrates as it hits my energy field. So it has no effect on me, but you're not going to take it home with you either. So the benefit to you is you don't have to spend your lifetime working through this density. It's a much quicker process, and it will move you farther along on your growth process than if you were to not do that. So when we do this, you're going to keep sending that density to me. We generally go for about 10 or 15 minutes, and I play a little music in the background. A friend of ours, Mark Romero, who's a high vibrational musician, he'll be here at the expo again this year. So, yeah. Forgot to tell you.
Secret. You were supposed to know that.
Oh, yeah.
They were keeping it a secret.
Whoops, I guess I let the cat out of the bag. But anyway, he's a high vibrational musician, and he will be here performing live at the expo this year. So the music we're playing here, he'll be performing live there, and we'll be doing energy transfers every day of the event there, and we'll have the opportunity to have him actually playing live and accompanying us at that event. So I'll play that, and we'll go for about 15 minutes. At the same time, I'm going to be sending, or rather the 13th dimensional consciousness will be sending an energy through my heart center to all of yours online as well as in here. Now, you may visualize that as a white light energy, but as I said, you just simply need to sit here, and that's all you need to do. And that'll be going on all throughout the time that we're doing the process as well. So we'll be doing this circular energy. You'll be sending your density to me, and I'll be sending this white light to all of your heart centers, and that will go on until we finish. Barb's going to be, I'll have my eyes closed. Barb will be studying the room through the process. She can see the energy moving around the room and see what's going on with each of your energy fields. When she feels like you've had enough, she'll stop me and we'll finish at that time. Since we're in a general audience here today and some of you are new, we generally keep the energy at a certain level so that it isn't so much that it overtaxes some of your systems. And that's why she sort of monitors them to see when you've had enough, and at that point we'll finish and move on to the next thing. Any questions about the process or anything? Okay, all right. So I think this is a good place. We can do it now. So I'm going to play a little music in the background, and you can just get comfortable. If you're not in a place, if you're watching online and you're not in a place where you can just sort of relax and go into a relaxed state, then, or if you're driving or something, that's okay. It's not a big deal. The process is still effective, and we have people all over the world who participate like that, and sometimes they're not in an optimal place, and the effects are still there regardless. So I'd like you all to relax and breathe comfortably. And just focus your intention on releasing any density. And just simply be willing to participate. Nothing more is necessary, but if you'd like, you can focus on anything in your life that's causing you stress or negative emotions. Or just say a prayer to your higher self or whoever you ordinarily pray to and ask that your density be released to me. And if you'd like, you can visualize that as a dark cloud of energy and just send that to me all throughout. And at the same time, I'm going to be sending a white light from the 13th dimension to all of your heart centers, and that will be happening all throughout as well. So I'm going to be silent now, play a little music in the background, and I'll come back when we're done. Forgot to ask you to look
I
at it
know.
beforehand, but what is it? What did it look like before?
Well, the energy was, in some of the newer people was really there, or in every energy was really low, and like, you know, it's doubled, you know, and the people, the newer people, and this was a very peaceful, you know, release. The people were, once they were, it's almost like we know that he says it just burns off of me, but yet they wanted to send it to you gently. And it was very, very peaceful, very loving. I mean, they lovingly gave away their negative karma in a very peaceful manner, you know, and accepted that. So, and then I just see, you know, so many happy faces. I mean, almost everybody's smiling now. So that's really nice. It was a very beautiful thing. I just love watching this stuff. Yeah. Every time it's different. You never know what you're gonna. I never know what I'm gonna see next. You know, it's just.
Barb and Michaela both usually describe so this collective consciousness. There's a being that's always with me on this side of it, and he goes by the name of Muhammad, not the religious figure Muhammad, but he's somebody who's been a teacher to me through many incarnations. And quite often they'll see him in the room, but he's like a tall, bearded guy, right? Yeah. Did you see anything in the room, or yeah?
Yeah. Actually, today I saw a big Merkaba in the middle of the room, which was kind of interesting. I did see beings, very tall beings. Lately, I've noticed really tall, like Anunnaki-looking beings come in when you do your energy transfer. But I had one just stand right behind me, put his hands on top of my head. So, yeah. But I always do see Muhammad. He's always here.
We're in an interesting time on the planet right now. A lot of amazing things happening, and while it may seem on the surface that that's not the case, I mean, because what will happen when you go through this process is you will start to align with a different version of reality. There's a lot of conversation about how we're moving to a fifth dimension and how the Earth is going to split into two different consciousnesses, and my perspective on that is there are many different dimensions that are coexisting at this time and space. And so, as an example, my family lives in a very different dimensional reality, and occasionally I have to go visit that reality, but for the most part I live in my own reality, and in my reality things like telekinesis and telepathy and channeling are real, whereas in their reality, those are not even conversation topics or even something that exists in the world. So we live in very different realities, and as we go forward into the future, there's going to be more and more of that splitting between two different realities. Many of you, those of you who are in the United States anyway, occasionally have to go to the Secretary of State or government offices, and it's sort of like stepping off of a spaceship into a very dense reality. In that world, different rules apply, different understandings exist. And as you go through this process, what will happen is your consciousness will expand, and so the reality you live in will subtly shift until eventually you live in this heightened state more and more often, where there isn't so much suffering, where you attract into your life very high vibrational experiences and people. And occasionally on the holidays, you may have to visit that denser reality, Thanksgiving, Christmas, visit your family. But for the rest of the time, you're going to exist in this other place. And even when you do have to visit that denser reality, you're not as much pulled into it. You can still exist in your own space while being there. And this is how a lot of enlightened beings or masters in the world experience life. They're still here with us, and we can go see them whenever we want in their physical incarnations, but they don't experience reality the same way that the average person does. They don't experience suffering in the same way. Doesn't mean they don't have emotions. Certainly, all human beings to some degree or another experience emotions. But experiencing emotions and experiencing suffering are two different things. Emotions are for example, if you're walking and you stub your toe on a table leg and it hurts, and you experience the pain of that hurt, and for a moment you may experience some emotion. But in the next moment, the pain is gone, and you forget about it and you move on with your life. That is a good expression of emotion. Whereas somebody who stubs their toe and they're still complaining about it 2 days later when they don't even feel that pain anymore, that is suffering. A lot of individuals experience suffering that way. Maybe they got divorced 20 years ago and they're still complaining about their ex-wife or ex-husband. And so there's still suffering that exists from an experience that has long been in the past. And when you elevate your consciousness and lower that density in your energy field, you'll find that you can go through life in a heightened state without so much suffering and difficulty. We are heading into this future as a collective consciousness now. It may not seem like it, but I can tell you that it is happening. And I work with a lot of very talented, people like Michaela and Barb and many other people like them who are coming from very mainstream backgrounds. A lot of professionals, medical doctors, nurses, engineers, people like that who are having dramatic awakening experiences and having to leave behind their former lives and their former careers because it no longer resonates with them, and making a transition to something that's much more of a spiritually based life. So I can tell you it is happening everywhere. It's just that people who have those experiences are not really talking about it publicly so much yet, because as a whole there is the whole collective consciousness as a whole is not quite there yet. But as we head into the 2020s or 2040s, there's going to be this very rapid acceleration of time and consciousness. And an experience that may today take a year will be compressed into smaller and smaller gaps of time. So maybe this year there'll be certain events that occur where in another few years, what might have taken a year to happen will compress into a month. So you'll find that the sensation of time acceleration is going to increase and increase and increase into the decades ahead. What that means is people are going to be awakening at a faster and faster and faster pace, and more of them will be experiencing that. And as a result, also, a lot of things in our society are going to change at a really fast pace. Huge technological breakthroughs and innovations, which, we can already sort of see the beginnings of that coming down the line. Is there a question? Is that what you're... No? Okay.
There is a question, but...
Okay. As I said last time we were here, even in a month we're going to have self-driving cars and taxis on the road, which is a huge innovation, which first time cars have really taken that kind of a leap forward in their development. But that's just one example. If you can imagine all facets of our society taking that sort of a leap forward, where in 20 years, probably almost no one is going to own a car because you won't have to anymore. There will be no need to do that. Where up to this point, we've always had that as part of our society. And the same thing is going to happen in longevity as well. People are going to live longer into their hundreds of years and beyond that. We're going to see huge changes in consciousness where more and more individuals are going to move into a more spiritually based way of being and living and working. We're going to see emerging, it's already happening, of medical and spiritual based techniques of healing and health. That's already happening. A lot of light workers I work with now are coming from medical professions, and they're integrating spiritual techniques and modalities into their medical practice and blending the both into something that actually works better. So a lot of these things, even pharmaceutical, while it may not seem like it right now, and a lot of them are going to go through a period of some suffering because they're not willing to change, but you are starting to see even pharmaceutical companies are starting to move toward a model of, instead of how do we treat cancer and keep a person having cancer for the next 20 years, to how do we extend somebody's life for another 50, 100 years in extraordinary health, as opposed to just trying to treat an illness. These kind of things are already happening right now. So really a very bright future, a very Atlantean type of society is ahead of us. And that's why these things are happening. That's why I'm here doing this right now as well, to help those of you who are on the forefront. If you're here in this audience, you're on the forefront of that. You're still early in that movement. And you are in the forefront of that move toward a higher consciousness world. We're still a very small fraction of that. And by going through this process, you will be those pioneers who help those individuals in the future as they are transitioning into this new awareness. So it's a very exciting time, an interesting time to be alive. Do you have a question somewhere?
There's a question online. Could you please talk about where this reality's financial system is heading?
Okay. Well, that's an interesting and big topic, because I think, first of all, I want to give some context to the question, because before I address the question itself, because I think especially people who are of this conversation, of a spiritual nature, tend to have issues around money. And while many of us in a spiritual conversation may judge those who have money or those in the world who are very affluent and wealthy as being attached to money, that's not always the case. Now, if an individual is greedy about money or material things, certainly there's an attachment to money. But I do find that a lot of light workers and a lot of people who are on the spiritual path tend to have more attachment to money than people who have a lot of money. And I think that's an important thing to understand, because money should exist in your reality as like air exists in your reality. You don't think about the air, but each of you are breathing it all throughout this time that we've had together. It's just something that is in the background of your human experience. It facilitates this physical body, allows it to function here in this reality to fulfill your human experience, whatever that is you came here to experience. But you don't think about that air. You rarely think about it. And even when you do think about it, you're not worried that the next breath of air isn't going to be there. And you're not worried that this person sitting next to me is sucking up all the air and there's not going to be enough for me, right? We don't have those kind of thoughts about air. We don't worry that the air we breathe was just breathed out by somebody else. But we think about money that way, though. We worry, well, if that person has more money than me, then there's not going to be enough for me. Or if they have more, I can't have more. Or, we feel like there's not enough. So if we treated air the way we treat money, we would all suffocate to death. Because we'd be holding our breath, holding in the air, worried that the next breath of air wouldn't be there for us to inhale, and so we'd all pass out because of that. Yet this is how we treat money. So attachment to money is not necessarily the having of too much of it or the having of none of it. It is when you give it too much importance or significance in your life. Money should exist as simply a flow of energy in your life that comes and goes, that allows you to live your human experience to its fullest potential. If you didn't breathe air to the fullest potential that your body requires it, you wouldn't be able to live very long. In the same way, if you don't allow the money to breathe in and out of your experience, you're also not going to live to your fullest potential. There are a lot of people who are on a spiritual path who are very negative toward money, or they feel like people shouldn't charge money for this, or that person is a billionaire and therefore they must be corrupt or evil. We can't make those judgments. We don't know. I mean, sometimes you know, but to some extent we don't really know if somebody's a billionaire. Are they attached to money? Because there are some billionaires out there who don't care about money at all. They just happen to be very good at something and they happen to make a lot of money. But they don't really care about the money itself. They just care about the life that they're living. And there are people who are living on the streets and homeless who have more attachment to money than a lot of billionaires. So we have to keep that perspective in mind the best relationship you can have with money is to not even notice that it's there, to just allow it to function in the background of your life, to allow you to live to your fullest potential. Now, if money is preventing you right now, or rather the lack of it, is preventing you from living to the fullest potential of who you came here to be, then you have an attachment to it. And that is something that for you to live optimally shouldn't be there. So I think it's really important to make that point because we are moving toward a future where we are going to have less attachment to money. But I think a lot of people have that concern about the financial situation, and a lot of these spiritual conversations are around. In recent years, there's a belief that all this wealth is going to be released to the public, and we're all going to live in affluence, and or some king or queen in some other country is going to release their wealth and everybody's going to get millions. It doesn't quite work like that, because think of it this way, and I don't know if any of you know the statistic on how many people who win multi-millions in the lottery go broke in a couple of years and end up in jail. It's very high. So why is it that we can take somebody who's poor, give them millions of dollars, and they end up broke in a few years? How can you possibly spend that much money in such a small amount of time? Yet they do that. So it has nothing to do with the money itself. It has to do with the vibration of the person. If you give $1 million to a millionaire, they'll turn it into 10 million, because the vibration is already there to be able to deal with that, and the non-attachment to money, or the different relationship with it. So it doesn't matter if some king or queen or whoever gives millions to the world, which I don't see that happening, but even if it did, that's not going to change anybody's wealth thermostat or quotient. All it's going to do is the people who already have are going to have more, and the people who don't have are still going to have nothing, because it has nothing to do with the money itself. It has to do with the vibration of the individual and their consciousness around money. So we are heading into a future of a lot of abundance, financial and otherwise, but it's up to each of you to find yourself in that abundant state of being so that you can participate in that. Much in the same way as I used my family as an example earlier, they live in a different reality where the kind of things that are part of my reality don't exist. But they exist very much in my reality. In fact, there are a lot of things that exist in my reality that don't exist in probably most of your realities either. But they will in the future if they don't already. And in the same way, even if we're heading into a very abundant future, that doesn't mean everybody's going to experience it, because not everybody is ready for that. Not everybody is in resonance with that reality. Now, that having been said, as I said earlier, we are moving toward a very rapid acceleration of in the future of growth and expansion in many areas. And so abundance is going to be more a part of society. I mean, if you imagine, no one will have to own a car. You can go anywhere and it won't cost you very much at all. That is a very abundant society. Or now, a lot of the technologies that are going to come out in the future are going to make a lot of our careers obsolete. We won't need truck drivers or UPS drivers. We won't really need police officers so much, because cars are going to be automated. They won't speed. And so many of our professions, the medical profession, there's going to be a lot of artificially intelligent systems that can perform operations and diagnose illness better. And people are going to live longer, so illness is not going to be so much of a problem anyway. So what happens in a future where most of the careers and jobs that we've known so far no longer exist? Well, we're moving into that kind of a future now. Now, it's not going to happen in the next 2 or 3 years, but in the next 20, 30 years, we're going to be well on that path. to where a lot of these things that we consider our professions, where we earn the money to live, are not going to exist in that world. And they'll transition. Now, that doesn't mean that everybody's going to go be poor or broke. There are a lot of other things that will come in to replace those ways of living. For example, a lot of technologies now, as an example, there are going to be many passive ways to earn income so that human beings don't have to work so much. And I think that what's going to happen is, when we start living into the hundreds of years and beyond, and we don't have health problems, and we don't have to work so much, what's going to be left is the development of human potential, the development of optimal health, the development of higher intelligence, the development of higher abilities like telepathy and telekinesis and intuitive things like that. A lot of what we're doing as an organization is sort of on the forefront of what's coming for the whole collective in the next decades ahead. And we'll have the time and the luxury of being able to do those things. But where is the money going to come from? Well, eventually, in the long term, money will not exist as a means of exchange as we know of it today. That's a little ways off. But it will come into being. And as it comes into being, there is this in-between step that will occur, which is what we're heading into now. And that in-between step is there are going to be more passive ways of earning income. For example, as I used earlier, self-driving cars. Tesla will have a car on the market in about a year that's self-driving that you can buy for about $30,000, $40,000, and it'll work for you. You can lease it to their cab service. It will leave and drive people around all day long, gather fares, and come back and park in your driveway when it's done. Now, you've made money. You haven't had to do anything. And they estimate it'll make about $30,000 a year and has about an 11-year lifespan before it needs any major repairs. So here's one way that you can passively earn income without doing anything. So that frees up your life to live and do whatever you want with that life. There are many other things through, and some of you may be familiar with cryptocurrencies. There are many cryptocurrencies out there. For example, there's a new browser. Some of you probably use Internet Explorer or Firefox or Chrome. There's a new browser called Brave, which is actually quite great. And it's becoming more popular. It's accelerating in its popularity more than the other ones are. What's unique about Brave is, as opposed to if you use Google and you see an advertisement on Google and you click on it, the advertiser is paying Google for the advertisement, but you're the one who clicked on it. If you use Brave, though, 75% of the ad proceeds go to you, the viewer of the ad. So just simply by surfing the internet using this brand new browser, you're going to be paid for doing that. So what we're going to see is a lot of income streams, instead of where right now you may have a job and you go to that job and you get a paycheck from that job. In the future, you're going to have many streams of income that are coming in from little streams all over the place, from many different sources, from just browsing the internet, from a self-driving car that you may lease out. These are just two examples, but there are many other passive forms of income that are available now, many of them, but that many more are going to be available in the years ahead. So there are quite a few means through which that human beings will be able to earn their income as we go forward. There's also a lot of conversation right now around a universal basic income, which, to some degree, if it's put out by governments, we would concern about it, but there are a lot of other organizations and nonprofits that are coming up with plans for issuing a universal basic income, which basically is everyone will get a base income without having to do anything. Let's say $30,000, whatever it is in your area that's needed for the basic necessities. And that income will be given to you. And then if you want to work to do something and earn more, you can, but you don't have to. So these are some of the different things that are coming in the future. Now, at the moment, there is a movement toward alternative currencies that's taking place. I've talked about it a lot in our previous talks here. Cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and so on are starting to take over and replace alternative currencies. A lot of the banks around the world are very concerned about this and trying to control it, but cryptocurrencies, and to a great extent Bitcoin in particular, are not really under the control of any particular bank or governmental system. It's an international currency that was essentially created by the people and now is basically run by the people. And it has its own value. It cannot be printed to extreme and have hyperinflation like any other fiat currency around the world. It is actually something that appreciates in value. But there are many other cryptocurrencies like that. And we are going to move toward a more electronic cryptocurrency-based future. Now, a lot of the big entities are starting to release their own, like Facebook is about to release their own cryptocurrency very soon as well. But, and so you are going to see some centralized forms of currency like that. But to a great extent, I think in the long-term future, we are going to see decentralized currencies, meaning there's no individual or company or government that's behind them. It's just something that's facilitated by the people and for the people. And that is something that's been around for about the last decade, and now it's picking up in momentum, and it's becoming a really big part of our society. You can actually use Bitcoin to buy things all over the world these days. You can buy Starbucks coffee with Bitcoin. You can buy a Dell computer with Bitcoin. So, and more companies are starting to offer that option of using cryptocurrencies as a means of exchange, where only a few years ago, if you didn't have a US dollar in the United States or wherever you're living, that fiat currency was the only means of exchange. Now you can use Bitcoin, which was not created by any government or institution well, it was originated by an individual or a group. We don't know who it is, but it is now in the control of the people. And those are things that are going to become a huge part of our life and society in the very near future, and already are becoming that. So what was the exact question? Does that address the question?
I think so.
Okay.
There's another question. I don't know if you can answer this, but will there be a difference where you live, continentally, for example, and therefore vibrationally, in your opinion?
Are there different vibrations in different parts of the world, essentially?
Yeah, looking into the future, I think.
Looking at the future of the world. Well, every region has its own consciousness. Just like in this room, there's a certain consciousness that exists that doesn't exist outside of this room. And in the same way, every country has its own consciousness, every region has its own consciousness, and has its own collective karma as well. So yes, for example, if you were to go to China or Iran or India, it has a different vibe to it, it's a different feel, it has a different consciousness than in the United States. And that's going to be the case for some time to come. But the things that I'm describing that I mentioned earlier about this move toward this different future, that's going to happen across the globe regardless of region. Think of it this way. When the internet first came out, most people thought it was a fad and it was never going to last and it was a ridiculous idea and it's going to crash every computer in the world and you don't want to buy things online because somebody could steal your credit card and it's too risky. And now this whole event is run on the internet and we connect with people all over the world on the internet. We can't imagine not having life without the internet. There are Indian gurus sitting in caves in India who have internet access now. And so it is something that's become a part of the fabric of our reality. And it affects everybody. It doesn't matter where you live in the world. It could be a country in the middle of nowhere and people have access to the internet. Now, maybe not to the same degree as we have here in the United States, but nonetheless, it is still there. So the changes that I'm describing now are global. They're not local. Of course, some countries are going to be a little bit farther than others in terms of technology. The US will probably be one of the forerunners of some of the technological innovations. But everybody's going to be affected by this, and everybody's going to be touched by this to some degree or another. And certainly the consciousness aspect of it is happening globally. That's not going to be limited to any one area or another. But there are some countries that are trying hard to limit the progress of this as much as they can. Cryptocurrencies are illegal in some countries. And so in those countries, you have to try to find some other way to purchase them. And there are more regulations and limitations being put around it. So certain countries are going to move a little slower simply because the institutions that exist that are afraid of this movement are trying to do what they can to suppress it. But in the same way, the internet, when it first came out, also had the same kind of experience, and yet it's part of our life now. So in the same way, in 20 years, this will be a very revolutionarily, if you can imagine from what happened from the 1980s till now in terms of computers to internet to cell phones to everything else that we have now, if you can imagine that the next 20 years are going to be significantly more advanced in terms of how far we'll go from where we are now. The world in the future is quite dramatically different. It's hard to comprehend what that will be like. And the kind of tools and resources that will be available to us. It will be global, but we do have this period of time where there is going to be some resistance to moving in that direction. And part of what I'm doing here is helping each of you to remove some of your own individual resistance toward that new future, but also by you elevating your consciousness, it's going to affect the whole collective as well. And the whole collective is going to nonetheless move in that direction regardless of that resistance that exists. So some parts of the world will move slower, but as a whole, we're all going to get there because that is just where we're heading as a collective. Was there another? No? Okay. Yeah. Can you, Mike?
On stage. I think you mentioned something earlier about like our frequencies with all the technology and everything we're swimming in. And I know you do a lot of work with this. I believe you do. Can you talk more about like our technology and how I believe that what we're doing here does help to just let us move and be with it and still not lose ourselves or our health or well-being in it. I don't know if you can speak more about that. Yeah.
Well, yes. Now, this is not a concern for me personally, but that's because my physical structure is different so that I can do what I do. But everybody, to some degree or another, is different also from everybody else. Some of you have very high levels of consciousness, and when you're at a very high level of consciousness and vibration, you no longer resonate with those lower density energies. The people who are the most affected by cellular transmissions and EMFs and all these kind of things in our environment are those whose vibration is more in alignment or matching those energies. So keep in mind, those vibrations that exist in this reality are more dense energies, that are more three-dimensional dense energies. Whereas if your vibration is moving toward fifth dimensional or higher, or just continuing to grow, you're not really affected by those things. Now, it doesn't mean in your head you're not still worried about those things, and certainly to some degree, if you're in fear, you're going to affect your vibration anyway. Fear is a great way to lower your vibration, regardless of what your natural consciousness is. But if you're not doing that, then this process, of course, will help. But to any degree that your consciousness is greater and your vibration is greater than those more dense energies, you don't resonate with them. You don't tune those in. Just like when I go out into the world, I don't see the world the same way that somebody who may have a lower consciousness would see the world, or somebody of a higher consciousness would see the world. Because we're all experiencing the same reality from multiple different levels of experience. And in the same way, your physiology, your mind, your brain, all of that is also experiencing this reality from wherever you are approaching that reality. So all you need to do, and of course there are plenty of technologies out there. There are pendants and things that people are making these days, scalar devices that help to mitigate for EMF. Well, the way, and I can't say all of those work, but some do. And the ones that do, they work because they alter your frequency. They alter the frequency around you such that these adverse energy fields are not affecting your own energy field. But you can do that yourself. You don't necessarily need a device. Not that there's any harm in using one, but if you are simply elevating your own vibration through your own physiological technology, or technology that's in your own physical body, then you can exist in this reality and they can do whatever they want with 5G or EMFs or whatever, and will have no effect on you or very little effect. And the higher your consciousness goes, the less effect it has. Your physical body is in your full control, but not a lot of people realize that. And so we come to believe these things. And I'm not saying that people are not affected by EMF, certainly they are, but I think that you have the power in you to change that. There are people in the world who don't eat any food or drink anything. And most medical doctors would say, well, they should be dead. There's no reason why they should be alive if they don't eat or drink anything. And yet they can control their physiology to where they're able to do that and their physical structure does not deteriorate because of it. There are some spiritual practitioners in India who bury their head in the dirt and stick their feet straight up in the air for 5 or 6 years in this altered meditative state, and to where plants and trees grow, around them and around their bodies, and they come out of it 5 or 6 years later perfectly fine. They're doing it by altering their own physiology using their own technology that exists within their own body and their own mind and consciousness. So each of you has the ability to control that and to manage that. It's just a matter of you choosing to do that. This process will certainly help you because as your energy field expands, which every time you do this, it will do that, you're naturally going to have this sort of buffer of energy around your energy field that sort of mitigates for electromagnetic fields or any kind of dense energy in your environment. So that will certainly help. But anything anything that will help you to grow in that way is going to be supportive of that. Does that help answer the question? Yeah. Do you have another? Good? Okay. It sounded like you had a question after I asked you. You look like you had a question in your mind. That's.
I didn't think a bunch of them came up, but I like what you said. I heard something about a yogi before, literally burying themselves and rejuvenating after a couple of years coming out of that. So
Right.
What really resonated strong is you took it to just our whole human potential, and I really think this is a wonderful resource. This is an awesome space and what you guys do. Just want to say that.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's where we're going as a collective, as a global society in the next couple to few decades, is we are going to move toward human potential, how to expand human potential. So in many ways, living like gods on earth, in that I think in many of us, probably in this room or who are watching online, will probably live well into their hundreds, at least 100, 200, and by the time you get to that point, you could probably extend it even further. And some of that will come through just simply elevation in consciousness. Some of that is going to come through nutritional supplements and changes or changes in diets. Some of it's going to come through augmentation, through different genetic processes and things like that. Even in mainstream medical research these days, they're learning how to rewrite genes or to turn off genes that may cause aging or different illnesses. So in the not too distant future, you will be able to go to a clinic and maybe you have cancer and the next day you don't. Or maybe you're aging and the next day you're not. And these are all things that are going to be available to us as a collective. Now, it'll come from different sides. Some of it's going to come from alternative healers who will possess incredible healing abilities, and that's already starting to happen. Some of it is going to come through conventional, like medical system as well. It's going to come through all sides, and eventually they'll all blend and merge into one common understanding. But in the beginning, we're going to see it coming from different sources that'll eventually combine. But yeah, as we head into that future, it'll be more about how can we live more extraordinary lives? How can we be smarter? How can we be more conscious? How can we live longer, healthier, and things of that nature? That will be the future that we're heading into. Not so much a future as the earlier question was about what's a financial system going to look like. In the long term, we'll still need money in the society. But in the long term, meaning the next 20, 30, 40 years, even long term, money is going to become less of an issue, because it's not going to be so much of the focus as just something that will just happen in the background of our society, and which will allow us to live our lives to a greater potential. Many of you could do that now, but we're not as a collective there yet, and so it'll happen slowly. But you'll have, if you just stick around for another 10, 15, 20 years, you'll be able to experience all of that and to live 50, 60 more years if you want to. And not in degenerative health, but in extraordinary health, and maybe even reverse your aging. Some of that is already available for you now out there. And I research a lot of this stuff, so I know a lot of things that are out there. But a lot of those technologies or supplements or whatever understanding is already available to us now, and there are things that you can take advantage of even in this moment. And then as the next thing comes out, you can just continue to do that. We'll be able to regenerate our bodies, and there are certain individuals in the world who are, even through spiritual practice, finding ways to be able to regrow organs in other people's bodies or in their own bodies, for example. But also science is doing that now, where we're starting to see the ability to be able to regrow parts of the body. So as your body ages, you will just replace it with, rather than having a donor organ, you will just grow your own. And these are all possibilities in the present, not available to everybody yet, but in the not too distant future they will be. So it's a very exciting and very positive world that we're heading into. It's not without its challenges, and certainly there is still a dense consciousness on the planet and a lot of insane people in the world who are doing not so kind things. But that's going to become less and less of an issue as we head into this more enlightened future.
Hi. Yeah, you had said in the beginning of the session that people's lives would likely change dramatically. Mm-hmm. And I did attend one of yours some time back. And maybe about a month or two after that, I lost my job. So I know that it's just been an awakening for me, I guess. That's the word that's coming to me. That I know when I lost my job, something in me said, it's not for you. It's not for you. Don't hold on to it. It's not for you. And it's just playing over and over and over and over in my head, because my body and my mind want to go back.
Yeah.
But that voice is like, it's so much stronger than that other voice. So yeah, it's a scary time for me right now financially, and you did talk about that briefly. Yeah. Physically. So things have changed, but I think it's a positive change for me. Yeah, it's scary because I don't know what's coming up, but I know in the collective that it will be a lot better for me and my family.
Yeah. Well, important, I'll share a little of my personal story here because I think it's relevant. You're always, when you remove the density and you raise your consciousness and things like that happen, and it does happen quite often, it's always for the better, but sometimes your own resistance to allowing your life to unfold could stand in the way of your progress. Now, when I was, prior to this period of my life, which I call my former life, so prior to 2011, I was at the time living a very mainstream life. I had a marketing agency and I was a professional trader and all that, as I said earlier. That was my life. It was a very mainstream, regular life. I was financially successful. I didn't really want for anything material. I was doing well in that world. And what happened was all of that fell apart. And I also had a relationship at that time that had been going on for 9 years. And everything completely collapsed in the span of about 6 or 7 months. And suddenly the company went under, my relationship was gone. I went through about 3 years when I started this journey. So I met Barb around 2011 or 12 and Michaela around 2012. And at that period of time, my former financial well-being was going completely the opposite direction, to where I had about 3 years, maybe 4 years, where I had almost virtually no money. I didn't have a car. I walked places, or people drove me if I needed to go somewhere. I got to a point, now I don't really require very much food, so it wasn't an issue, but I was eating almost nothing. To where after I met Michaela, she was dropping off groceries at my doorstep because she thought I was going to starve to death. But so a lot of people were concerned about my well-being, but for me, food wasn't such a big requirement, so it wasn't a big deal. But there were a period of about 3 years where I had almost no money, wasn't sure if I was going to end up on the streets, but I reached a point where I accepted that I was perfectly willing to sit on a park bench and feed pigeons and be happy if that's what happened, and that was okay with me. And at the same time, I met Barb and Michaela, and as she said earlier, we were doing these events in the public libraries in the beginning because I had no money to pay for a venue at the time. We were not collecting donations or anything. So we did everything free or almost no cost. And but what was happening in the background, though, was this organization was building. And meeting Barb, Michaela, we put on our very first expo at the Cobo Center in Detroit, and I had no money. So, I mean, literally no money to do that. And the event costs about $30,000 to put on. I had no money to do that. I was hoping that people would actually buy tickets to pay for the cost. Didn't happen. So I ended up pulled off the event even with no money, which was a miracle. And the next year we put on another event. Even fewer people showed up. And it cost me even more. I still had no money. But I did it anyway, because I knew that it just felt like it was something I needed to do. Now this is Expo number 7 we're going on. It still loses money. But the difference is that I've actually moved to a place in my life where there are enough other resources that I can pay for all of these things. So the organization as a whole is primarily financed by me now. And yet I had no money just a few years ago. So I can tell you that if when your life collapses, there's a reason for that. If I had been left to my own and what I wanted, I would still be doing what I was doing back in 2011, because I was perfectly content in that life. I was successful. I was content in my relationship. I had plenty of material things. Why would I want to do this? If the universe hadn't pushed me to move in this direction and taken everything away in order that I would have to completely rebuild it, I would not be here right now. And all of the 10,000 things that we're doing as an organization, all the lives we've impacted, would not have happened if that event hadn't occurred. Now, soon after that whole implosion of my life, I also had a spiritual awakening that sort of prompted me in this direction. So that consciousness shift that I had also opened up this doorway when it completely destroyed the previous one. So I can tell you that if you just simply have faith that your life is on track and go in the direction that is unfolding in front of you and not worry or resist that path you are going to end up somewhere great and somewhere that's better than where you were before. From where I am now, I wouldn't want to go back to that former life, because this life is more in resonance with who I am now, and it's more meaningful a life than that life for me. But from that standpoint, I wouldn't have wanted to go through all of those years of financial difficulty and everything that had to be created from nothing to get to here. So I can tell you the universe will always support you, and I can, all the various light workers that I work with, many of them go through these kind of experiences where their former life completely collapses, and then they unfold, this whole new life unfolds for them, and it's an extraordinary life. They're living amazing lives that would not have been possible if they held on to where they were before. So believe it or not, where you are and where you're going is a very good place. It just may be hard to see from where you are at the moment, but if you just keep going forward in faith, you will be led in the right direction, and it'll be something that's more in alignment with who you are now. Yeah. Okay, so we're about out of time, but stay tuned. Barb's first time ever doing an aura class here, and so she's going to be, if any of you are sticking around, she'll be taking some guinea pigs on stage to look at your auras and to tell you what she sees, and also sharing her lifetime of wisdom, being able to see energy fields as well. So it's the first time we've done that here. It's a special treat. And those of you online, we'll be ending this live stream and starting a whole new one for Barb's class. So come back in about 15 and we'll get started with that. Thank you. Thank you all for coming.